Shalom and welcome to our monthly edition of Powers in Play here from Jerusalem. Today we're going to focus on a document that was published earlier this month, namely the U.S. National Security Strategy for November of 2025, rather for the year of 2025 onward, and to discuss this and the implications, both for the state of Israel, the broader Middle East, and how all this is going to look in at least the month ahead until our next edition. But before we deliberate the intricacies related to this, let's introduce our distinguished experts for today, to include Colonel in Reserve Dr. Oren, formerly the Deputy National Security Advisor here in Israel, a vice president of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and a lecturer at Shalem College. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Long title for a short guy, but it's okay.
Fair enough. Brigadier General in Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly the Chief of Intelligence of Mossad, as well as a senior officer at the IDF Intelligence Directorate. On our right is Ambassador Ayalon, Jerusalem's former chief policy advisor to the Prime Minister, Deputy Foreign Minister, Ambassador to the United States, and we can go on and on. We'll stop there. And last but not least, our TV7 Editor-at-Large, Mr. Amir Oren. And Amir, reading this document and looking at what's not written there, much is to be said, but one thing is maybe a caveat in the whole complexities that we are faced with today, is that it doesn't seem like a actual strategy document. It's more of a policy directive of the direction toward what the United States aspires to achieve or aspires to head to. But it does not really give any tangible foundation to the complexities at hand, does it?
So the American system has three strata of documents. The one you referred to is the topmost, the National Security Strategy. Then you go down to the Department of Defense, now called Department of War, where they have the National Defense Strategy. We'll see whether they'll call it National War Strategy. And then you go even lower to the military, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff publish the National Military Strategy. So you translate the vision into something more concrete, and then you go down. Now, one must credit the Trump administration for truth in advertising. This is basically what Donald J. Trump ran in 2024. He promised an America First agenda, and you can see it in this strategy. America First, meaning, of course, first and foremost, the United States of America, but also Latin America, the Monroe Doctrine, or as they call it, the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and we see it in the Caribbean, Venezuela, and all of that. This is number one. And then they go to China to trade, and so on down the list until a few lines from the bottom, just before Africa. It sounds like perhaps 1492, but just before Africa, they get to the Middle East. The Middle East has been kicked out of its pedestal for the several decades between, let's say, 1990 until the present. It was the most important region, and now it's back to its natural dimensions, according to the administration, and we can go down the list. What are the core security interests? Israeli security is one of them, but not the most important one in the Middle East, which is almost the least important one.
Indeed. Well, Ambassador Ayalon, when we're looking at the statements that emerged out of the United States over the course of a little over a week ago, or a couple of weeks by now, We see that Ambassador Mike Waltz, who formerly served also as Trump's national security advisor, briefly, but nonetheless, he did assume that post for a while. He highlighted that the core foundation to the relationship between the United States and Israel is the Judeo-Christian foundation, which ultimately is the glue that sticks those countries together. However, the United States also projected within its national security strategy and the manner in which it's being advertised is a lot more transactional in essence. Where's the discrepancy between those two remarks?
Okay, first of all, Jonathan, I want to build on what you said and also Amir and about this this plan or strategic planning and relate to its timing. Next year, and I have to actually tie it with domestic politics of the United States. Everything is political. Henry Kissinger used to say that Israel doesn't have a foreign policy, only domestic, but I can say the same about the United States. And here we see a great exemplary of this plan, because he, exactly as you said, he ran on no immigration, America first, and keeping China at bay. And actually, what is this plan talks about is an anti-Islamist plan. So this is why, maybe not directly, it supports the Judeo-Christian alliance that most of Trump's supporters believe in. Because when he talks about the concern about the identity of Europe or the cultural, social challenges of Europe, yes, about from immigration, what does it mean? It's euphemism for the danger of Islam or radical Islam has already invaded, but taking control of Europe. So in that case, it's a very interventionist. We were always talking about isolationism of Trump's administration, but this is doing quite the opposite, because he takes the liberty here to actually help or interfere with European domestic issues by supporting, let's say, the right type of parties which are aligned with Trump's policy.
Indeed. Dr. Lehrman, naturally the reflection of this policy that we're hearing Ambassador Ayalon speaking of does have, it's going to be a challenge to sell this to those partners and allies that the United States needs to work with, on the one hand. On the other, the battle against Islamism, which is plaguing Europe and the United States to a lesser degree, but Europe, we see it in Canada, Australia, and elsewhere.
And also in Minnesota.
And, well, Minnesota is I hope it's not too late for Minnesota, but you really see the manner in which the aggressiveness has caused a lashback.
Up to a point, clearly. The manner in which Trump treated the former Prime Minister of Canada is probably the reason the left won an election that looked as if it was certainly going to once again to the right. And we saw similar effects elsewhere. However, at the end of the day, Europe is going towards the two vectors that Trump marks out. Even centrist parties in Europe now have much stricter immigration policies. Countries like Denmark have shown the way. At the end of the day, Italy and Germany are under right-wing governments, center-right or right.
Right of center.
Right of center. We'll just see what happens in the Netherlands, but is a centrist, going to be apparently a centrist government. Spain will flip, probably, and so on and so forth. And the other thing is, and here Trump, I think, feels vindicated that his emphasis on burden sharing is being translated into a much greater investment in military capabilities. And we saw a demonstration of this, the impact of this for Israel, in the most fascinating manner as the Israeli national anthem was played by the German military band when Israeli missile defense was being deployed to protect Germany. Anyone 80 years ago who would have been told of this scenario would have been hospitalized. But now
science fiction.
And it's worse.
But all of missile defense stems from Werner von Braun.
There you go. In a sec. But it's not just Europe. Look at the orientation of Sanaa Takaichi and where she's taking Japan. The same. It's the impact of Trump signaling not necessarily a withdrawal, but a very firm emphasis on burden sharing. In a sense, it's the end of the 80-year post-war period. We are sailing into new waters. But it does not mean the dismantlement of the alliance system. It means that it needs to shift to another base. And it's also true for Israel. It's time for Israel to consider the current model of the American aid package and to transform it into something more like a partnership, given where we are economically and technologically.
General Sofrin, if we take all of that and put it into layman's terms, we hear NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte highlighting during the foreign ministerial of NATO, the last one, that China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea,
The Kring.
of course, the Kring, as you always like to put it, Dr. Lehrman, alongside their proxies and vessel states, if we may call them as such, are preparing for a large-scale confrontation against the West. Does what Oren just mentioned basically entail or include in a global arms race to prepare for that final confrontation that the Secretary General of NATO is speaking of?
Let me put it this way. First of all, Europe got a wake-up call. On February 2022, when the Russian invaded Ukraine, and they understand that it's not only for Ukraine. Now, the fact that Mr. Trump is proposing now a ceasefire that will be based on the fact that each one of the areas that was conquered by the Russians will remain under their custody, it means about 1/5 of Ukraine will be under Russian control, and this is fait accompli. And they say that Ukraine, will not join NATO for the next coming 15 or 20 years, and you will reduce your armed forces. This is what we call an appetizer for the Russians to go on and attacking Europe. And Europe is terrified from that. The fact is that they're rearming themselves on what we call an unprecedented manner. Since if you look at the last 20, 25 years, nothing like that happened. They were all sleeping. And now they're waking up and they buy a lot of weapon systems and they're preparing themselves for a war.
It's frantic.
Of course. They're preparing themselves to fight the Russians on 2030 in Europe's soil without the assistance of the Americans. Now, if you look at the strategy, Mr. Trump didn't mention or didn't identify the Russians and the Chinese as enemies.
Mm-hmm.
Only rivals on the economical side. And he emphasized the need to stabilize the regime in Russia and the economics in Russia, not in Europe. That means that you Europeans have to apply to other demands of the Russians, in my point of view, of course. And therefore, after that, he will be satisfied.
he will be stabilizing its own economy and its own regime, and everybody will be pleased. And you Ukrainians, sit down quietly. We will protect you if needed, even though he's planning right now to reduce the quantity of units in Europe, to deploy them in the Indo-Pacific area. And by 2027, they say that you, Europe, have to fight by yourself without the assistance of the Americans.
Mr. Oren, if we take that into account, the United States has been pursuing, since the beginning of this incumbent administration, a Kissingerian approach of decoupling China from Russia. And it seems like in this context, the focus that General Sofrin is speaking about is part of that continuation or continuity of policy in an attempt to make a separation there that would deter China from acting alone. Yeah, is that something that we should take into account?
In American narratives, there are two obvious examples which are not in compliance with each other. One is President Kennedy's "A rising tide lifts all boats." And after the Cold War ended, collaboration, cooperation, let all the nations of the world and all the former blocs thrive and prosper. Our prosperity is helped by and is helping you. The other one is Trump's winner takes all. Now, when he wants to win, the way he did it in business, he doesn't have a lot of patience for losers. And therefore, he wants to be in cahoots with authoritarian regimes, China, Russia, Turkey, we can go down the list. And there was a very interesting comment his ambassador to Turkey and to Syria and Lebanon, Tom Barrack, made a few days ago, that in the Middle East, democracy is fine, but monarchies are the way to go.
And he also cast doubt on whether or not the state of Israel is an actual democracy, which was
which
atrocious.
Yes, a monarchy doesn't mean that Benjamin Netanyahu's successor would be Yair Netanyahu, but it means that as long as you're in power, you're a monarch. So in that sense, Trump would like to have free trade and a better relationship between the major powers, but he doesn't have a lot of time for the minor players of the world.
Ambassador Ayalon, let's bring Israel into the picture. What are we to make out of this strategic shift and the complexities that arise from a strained relationship between the United States of America and continental Europe? In particular, of course, Great Britain should be also included in this mix. And how does that reflect to Israeli activities in the Middle East at a time when, naturally, we are faced with a ongoing challenge, particularly vis-a-vis the Islamic Republic of Iran, but not only?
Well, it's counterintuitive, but to think that this may benefit Israel, when Trump speaks about America first and not putting the Middle East as on the pedestal, as Amir said, but bringing it down quite a few notches. I think this may benefit Israel for the major reason is that if the United States is withdrawing from regions that it is not interested in, that means in order to keep stability, they have to have some agents or, let's say, proxies, if you will, that takes care of things. And I think after the Iran war, the 12 Days War, where I think everybody was stunned with the Israeli capabilities, Trump, I believe, is looking to Israel, actually, to keep stability here, especially vis-a-vis the two major threats. One is the Iran, and the other one is radical Islam, or the Sunni Islamists and the Shia Islamists. So in that case, I think that Israel may benefit from that, and for that, it will be more, I think, conducive for the United States to continue the package, the defense package between Israel and the United States, which is up for renewal in 2 years, in 2028. So it may be counterintuitive, but Israel will win out of it.
I will point out that when we're talking about the MOU, I think it's vital for Israel. I really think that it's not only vital for Israel, the added value, just to take this into account, the United States spends $144 billion on R&D, research and development, which if you take the $3.3 billion that it provides Israel, of course you need to add it and then put it in the equation, but it's less than 2.34% of the sum that they invest in R&D. The quantity of research and development that comes out of those tools that the United States provides Israel is worth more than much of that investment.
Well, I think the Prime Minister has already spoken, and others, myself included, have already written that looking down the road, whether it's 10 years or a bit or more, we need to think about doing the same thing to the aid package that was done a generation ago to the economic support fund. It was eased out in return for something else. At the time, it was an enlargement of the foreign military, of the FMS funds. But now, I think a country positioned as we are, technologically and economically, should seek to enhance the American commitment to the QME, to the qualitative military edge, but ease out the budgetary element. The size of the Israeli budget, the size, the willingness of the Israeli people through their elected representatives to greatly enlarge the defense budget in the next few years as a lesson of October 23 can be also translated into easing out the dependence on American dollars and working more and more closely in line with what you've just said about bringing our technological capabilities closer together, becoming partners. First and foremost, of course, in creating Israeli capabilities and American capabilities, but also in creating technological solutions for others. As we saw, the Arrow 3 now in Germany is an Israeli-American project. It's the result of the BMDO coming to Israel back in Reagan's era, asking us to come in on what they called at the time Star Wars or the Strategic Defense Initiative. And look what happened. We ended up being the first country in the world with a deployed missile defense, which proved itself in combat. And that's where we should be going.
Let me support what Oren just said, because we know that there is a growing sentiment in the U.S. Congress and apparently U.S. public, especially in the younger generation, both the extreme left wing and the extreme right wing, regarding Israel being subsidized by American taxpayers. Israel is getting approximately 20 billion shekels, not dollars, a year out of this MOU. The Israeli budget can support an extra 20 billion shekels. Of course, it has to be prioritized in a different way. But Israel should still get access to the best and latest American technology. Israel should feel secure also by policy commitments, but Israel shouldn't be perceived as a burden on the American taxpayer, giving Israel a handout of approximately $4.5 billion a year. I understand.
I completely agree with you. However, I think the MOU is in America's interest. It's not about Israel.
But they don't have enough for the Marines, the Air Force. Everyone has
They do.
a justified claim for more. Israel shouldn't be looked at as being given a handout.
I agree. And
Dollar-wise.
But that is the job of the president to explain why to the American people. The administration has a task to explain to the American people why this is good for the American people. And there is a lack in that department. But ultimately, when you're talking specifically about the MOU to the State of Israel, when I look from it from an American perspective, I think about it as this is making thousands of American jobs. It provides a connection with a country that provides strategic value at the highest levels. It establishes R&D to weapons and tools in larger scale than what the State of Israel would have procured in the event that this didn't exist. And from a security perspective, this is good for the American people.
But for President Trump, there is a difference between giving and getting. Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries are investing, or in some cases giving, deploying the $400 million Air Force One, and Israel is getting. And therefore, President Trump, favors those who give over those who get.
Well, I'll say a bold notion here. Qatar takes a lot more from the United States than it gives to it, and Israel gives a lot more to the United States than it takes from it.
Jonathan, there is a blind spot here about giving and taking with the United States. And this is not very much known, but Israeli, let's say, social security issues, all the pensions of Israelis mostly are invested in the United States. So if you sum up all the money that goes to American private equity funds or other programs, these are hundreds of billions of dollars, and this should also be put into the equation, and I'm not sure that this government is aware of doing that. So a challenge for you, Iran, to bring it up.
Obviously, at the end of the day, down the road, at some point, it's going to be politically inexplicable for a country with a GDP per capita higher than Germany, higher than for a decade now, higher than Japan's, to continue to ask for American taxpayers' money. But the QME, on the other hand, is of essence.
So on the QME...
And one more thing. We are in a completely different age in terms of the relationship between the War Department and Israel. We still remember that the first American Secretary of Defense was driven to suicide, among other reasons, because he couldn't comprehend why Truman allowed Israel to be created. And now we have a Department of War that is here working with us, that gave the concluding blow to the Israeli campaign in Iran, that sits in Kiryat Gat with participants from the Abraham Accord countries and American officers and American officials and Israeli officials working together to plan the future of Gaza. All of this speaks to a relationship, forgive my language, between the deep states on both sides that is completely different than anything we've known. And that is the basis for looking towards the future.
And yet, General Sofrin, Israel is very clear-eyed about the Middle East. It sees what's happening around it. It has the intelligence going deep into the veins of many of the, if not all, of the state actors and non-state actors operating in its sphere. And yet, when you look at what Ambassador Tom Barrack from the United States says about the various countries in the region, where he does not understand their ulterior motives, but he wants to get from A to Z, and that is his mandate, and that's why he goes that way. And that in the process, he rebukes Israel time and again, and ultimately makes that phone call to President Trump, who then goes based on his information to make tactical decisions rather than strategic outlook to a long-term strategy that can benefit the United States in the long term. We see projects like Syria, where on the one hand, they're pushing to revoke the Caesar Act and to give them everything that they need. In the strategic document, by the way, it still states that Syria can become a problem, but with the help of the United States, Israel, Turkey, and others, they can become also a success. But then you hear the same Ahmed al-Shara, known by his alias in Al-Qaeda, Abu Muhammad al-Julani, coming out and saying, when asked by Christiane Amanpour in the Doha conference in Qatar, you were a terrorist. And then he goes and says, I wasn't a terrorist. Al-Qaeda and Daesh and all those organizations, they're not terrorists.
They're fighters.
They're, it's people are more enlightened.
Youth movements.
It's youth movements, right? Their people are more enlightened these days, as he puts it. Who are the terrorists? Look at Gaza. Look at Afghanistan. Look at Iraq. Those who came and invaded, those are the state terrorists. He didn't say Israel and the United States by name. But he explicitly states that I'm not reformed. It's just their reformation that is in process to understand that we, Al-Qaeda and Daesh and all those horrendous jihadist organizations are the ones who carry the beacons of hope for the world. And those state actors, namely Israel and the United States, Europe, of course, is in that context also relevant, and Australia and others, those are the state terror, wreaking havoc around the world. And yet, you don't hear any reaction from the West, those same countries that are the only hope for the Syrian people and this terror regime in Damascus to make it.
And they don't hold him to the test. Right now, they give him the benefit of doubt.
Well,
The legitimacy.
that's an honest.
In this document of the strategy was published just now. The Middle East is degraded due to only one thing. They don't need the energy from the Middle East. No more. They can rely on their own capabilities, and they don't need the oil coming out from the Middle East to U.S. Now, he looks at that at the economical side, first of all. Second, he declared, since he went into the White House for the second term, no more wars. I want to end all the wars. I want to get to peace achievements. And namely, I want to go and get the prize, the Nobel Prize. That's what I'm aiming for.
But you already got the football Peace Prize.
Let him finish.
Not enough. It's not enough. It's only partly.
It's a stepping stone.
Now, he wants to end the wars in the Middle East. He doesn't look at Mr. Ahmed al-Shara as a terrorist. He's a nice guy. He's impressive. He's a good man.
With a strong history.
Strong history. He wants to rebuild Syria. We have to allow him. And you Israelis, don't interrupt him. Don't go inside. Don't bother him. Let him build the country. We will assist him and you stay out. And this is a warning. It's not a request. It's a warning. Okay? He looks at that at the same way to what happens in Gaza. Nevertheless, we know the situation in Gaza because we live here. We deal with that on a daily basis. But for him, the war in Gaza ended. That's it. We're going to establish the IFS. We're going to establish, ISF. We're going to establish all kinds of mechanisms. And you stay quiet. Don't push into Gaza. And Hamas will be disarmed or not disarmed. It's another question. Only the heavy weapon systems, not the light ones. It's good enough. And you have to settle with that. This is a total difference between the point of view of American administration and the people who live here. And deal with that on a daily basis. Same goes with Lebanon. Same goes with Iran. Now, they won't let us go into Lebanon or into Iran for another round without their permission or without the authorization or green light. And that means that we have to calculate how to deal with that. Now, they are pushing kind of applying pressure on the Lebanese government to dismantle Hezbollah, it won't happen. They won't do it. They don't have the capability, they don't have the will. And they're dragging time. And the Shiite within the Lebanese armed forces will not fight Hezbollah.
Which is roughly 60%.
Yeah, of course.
These-
Nobody will fight Hezbollah, not the military, not the Lebanese armed forces. So who's going to do it? They willingly will give all the weapon systems to the Lebanese government? Never. Will never happen. And that means we are going to have to fight wisely in coordination with the Americans, because they are now holding the stick and telling us, please be quiet and don't annoy us. We have enough problems to deal with, and we want to get to peace agreements all over the Middle East. And they won't interrupt us.
A good friend of mine in Europe who was one of the leading generals of one of the European militaries told me at some point that Israel has made so many tactical achievements over the last 2 years that now it's time to translate that into a strategic victory. With the time left, roughly 4 minutes, each of you has 45 seconds, less than a minute. What are we expected, or what should Israel do in order to make that transition into a strategic victory? General Sofrin, we'll start with you.
I think that first of all, we had to replan it before we went into this war, to define what will be the end goal. We didn't do that, and now we're dragging into something that we didn't plan, and we are forced by the Americans to go on one direction. And therefore, we have to maximize that and to look into that and into the situation and to say, okay, how are we going to play on these terms and these constrictions that are being applied on Israel? It's a problem.
Colonel?
I think that a form of words on the Palestinian issue, not any real progress, because there cannot be a real progress with the current team in Ramallah, which any burden put on their shoulders would bury them. And by the way, for the first time, this is recognized by a UN resolution, which talks about a reform that needs to be implemented before Palestinian statehood. That wasn't there before. That's actually a step forward for Israel, not a step back. But some kind of form of language that would open the gates for cooperation with Saudi Arabia and with Egypt against the pressures that the Turks and others and the Qataris are applying on the administration, that could be a key for future policy.
Ambassador Ayalon?
Well, I would like to support Colonel Lerman's here. We need to turn the table over the Iranians. Right now, in the region, Israel is the isolated power, and we need to actually isolate Iran further. And in order to do that, I think we have to pay something in a Palestinian currency and to actually make the lemon into a lemonade by saying and banking on 2803, the UN Security Council resolutions, that we actually support the reforms of the Palestinian Authority. The fact that Israel does not, this government does not recognize the Palestinian Authority actually constricts any of Israel's moves. If we say, yes, we support it, without even talking about the Palestinian state, we want to recognize the Palestinian Authority and help them reform. This way, Israel also can be in the middle. By doing that, and if we bring in, or the Americans will bring in the Saudis and other Muslim countries, we can use this weight of all these Muslim countries against Hezbollah and against Hamas.
If there is evidence that Iran is rebuilding its ballistic missile arsenal, and by evidence, I don't mean the heavy load needed to convict, only to indict, then we will probably see a return to hostilities between Israel and Iran, with or without American participation.
But there is a lot of concern in Washington about Iranian activities, particularly.
Yes, so this is probably going to be one of the main topics later this month in Mar-a-Lago, where The climate is much warmer than in Washington. It's a good way to be during the holidays. And this is where Netanyahu will meet Trump and get his marching or non-marching orders.
Let's remember, Iran is an ally of Venezuela.
Iran is an ally of Venezuela, and Hezbollah
Has been
has
deeply
been
involved.
deeply involved in the Maduro regime. It's been utilizing that country and a couple of other countries also in their region in order to fulfill their malign aspirations, not only terror but also much drugs and human trafficking and those terror organizations. There's a fine line between terrorism and crimes of a criminal nature. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank General Sofrin, Dr. Leumann, Ambassador Ayalon, and Mr. Oren for all of your valuable insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. This has been TV7's Powers in Play. Until our next edition. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.